All right. Welcome to tonight's regular Board of Finance meeting on this Tuesday, December 8th. I'd like to call to order the meeting, and let's begin by citing the Pledge of Allegiance. Reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Karen joined. All right, let's begin by going through some of the first agenda items. Public input. I do see members of the public. Does anyone want to speak? Dion, can you see any raised hands?
There's no raised hands.
Okay, we'll assume no public input. Is there any correspondence? No correspondence. We go to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 10th, 2020. As the minutes were distributed in advance, I'd entertain the motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
I move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Good. Consideration of the 2021 regular meeting dates. Dion had distributed these. It's the standard second Tuesday of each month for the calendar year 2021, and then January 11th of the calendar year 2022, starting at 7 p.m. So all pretty much standard. So I'd entertain, I'm sorry, Nick, you're on mute.
I would make a motion to accept these dates for the scheduled meetings of next year.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Done. Next topic is the election of officers. The town charter requires us in the first meeting after the first Monday of November to select at a minimum a chair and a vice chair for the Board of Finance. I would suggest that we do that tonight. We're still missing some board members. So I am willing, if folks are, to just give it another minute to see if some members are going to join, or do we want to just get into it?
Let's
We know
go
where it's
ahead. I nominate Bob Manfreda for chairman.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Robert Palmer.
We have okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Move on to the next agenda item. That is the consideration of the police vehicle to be paid for out of the capital non-recurring account. You'll recall that during the budget season, two of the vehicles were to be funded out of the police budget, and one was to be funded out of the capital non-recurring. This board committed to buying that vehicle out of this account, and that's what is on the agenda for tonight. I see that we have both Matt and the chief on. I assume one of you will take the lead here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Selectmen just about a half an hour ago held a special meeting to consider this purchase. They approved it unanimously and voted to forward it to the Board of Finance for your consideration. The amount approved was $27,928 for the base vehicle and $11,873.41 for the emergency equipment and conversion. So that brings the total approved not to exceed $39,801.41. I submit that for your consideration.
Are there, before we make a motion, any questions? I guess the only question I've had is a reasonableness check question. I assume, Matt, this is just your quote unquote typical vehicle for the department. There's nothing special about it.
No, no, the only thing is, every few years, Ford Motor Company changes the configuration a little bit. And that, what that does is it means that some of the emergency equipment that's aftermarket that goes onto the vehicle doesn't convert over very easily. That puts a little bit extra cost on it. And I'm sure the chief can talk to that a little bit more. But aside from that, no, it's the base state bid that's approved for police interceptors.
And this it takes into account any equipment we can reconfigure then from an other vehicle to this vehicle, or is this all brand new?
No, it's not all brand new. What we can move in from the old car, we'll move in. Some of the stuff you can't, some of the stuff you can, and that's what this represents right here.
Steve, can I ask you a question? How many miles are on the car that you're gonna trade in?
So there's two possibilities of what we're going to trade in. I'm back and forth of which one. Probably about 80,000. By the time we trade it in, I'll probably have about 85,000.
Would that car go 6 more months, or you're saying it's going to absolutely fail?
The car that I'm probably going to trade in has been a lemon from day one. There's a car that's a year older that I'm going to keep over this one. So no, this is a car that we're supposed to get in the capital budget. So this is just in the course of normal action, our third car for this year.
So you're just getting it because you got the money approved, basically. It's not a big need right now?
No, it's a need. We usually ask for 4 cars every budget season. Sometimes we get 4, sometimes we get 3. If we go off that course, then we're going to be just kicking the can down the road and needing 5 or 6 cars next year instead of 3 or 4. So yeah, you could wait, but
and you said
5 or 6 next year.
You said there's 80,000 miles on that car. How many hours are on the car?
I don't know off the top of my head, Nick. It's a lot though. Usually by the time they hit 80 or 90,000 miles when we trade them in, the equivalent of the run hours is probably equivalent of a regular vehicle having about 300,000 miles.
And how many cars do you have lettered up and have light bars on at this point?
Let's see, there's 10 regular patrol cars, there's 2 SRO cars, 2 extra duties. So that's 14.
There's 10 of them? Just the lettered ones, just the patrol cars, there's 10?
Yeah, 14, 1-4, yep.
14, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Chief,
more-
did we buy the other 2 cars already? Are those already purchased and on the road?
Yep, that's why we waited until now. I wanted to get those 2 purchased, equipped, and on the road to make sure there was no other needs with this. So it gave us an accurate account of what we need for the third vehicle.
Bob, was there a motion yet or no?
No, the way I've been doing this, hopefully everyone's all right with it. We do questions first, so that folks have an idea, and then I'll make the motion. So any more questions? All right, not seeing any more questions. I'd make or entertain a motion to approve this capital non-recurring item for an amount in total not to exceed $39,801.41.
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm going to vote no on this because the only reason I believe is because the money is there. I think there's going to be more needs for this town in the next 3 to 6 months. The school's asking for money. People are being laid off. There's a big wave of COVID coming again. I don't see any reason we can't lay off on this decision for 3 to 6 months Bob, you and I had conversations about this. There's other needs in this town. There's 14 cars there. I think we can make it another 3 to 6 months to see where everything is going. So I'll be voting no for it.
I would only draw the distinction, right, that during the budget season, we did commit to funding this car through capital non-recurring. If we did not do that, the car would have been just funded under the normal approach in the budget. So to me, this is different, to your point, Nick, this is different than all the other items where we've been telling folks to hold off, right? Given what we know in the economy, to drive the old car one more year. This to me is different, and that's why I'll be voting yes for it. But I take your point. I think it is a very valid point. This, I think, is different. This item was committed to.
I'm just one vote.
As we all are. All right. So motion seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed?
Me, I oppose it.
So the motion passes. The item is approved. So thanks, Chief. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, board.
Next item is the Board of Ed update. I see Dr. Carver. I see Terry. See the chair of the Board of Ed and a number of Board of Ed members. Assume that we'll turn it over to Dr. Carver and Terry for the update.
Bob, can you, is this where the update was planned for COVID expenditures? I just wanted a little clarification, or did you want some general update about the Board of Ed?
Yeah, if you recall, Terry, a couple meetings ago, we talked about you coming to us on a slightly more regular basis to just give us updates. I think in particular, this would be an update on the COVID items, but to the extent there are other items that you think it would be helpful for the board to understand, maybe things coming down the pike, that would be helpful too.
Okay, then I'll let Dr. Carver start and have a couple of minutes just giving you an update on the status of our operations this year, because it's such an unusual year, and that will lead us into the COVID numbers.
Sure. So as you know, and we appreciate you inviting us back to give an update, not only in terms of where we are with the financial aspect of COVID, but also just a general update. You'll probably note that we're back in school full. It's been one of my goals and the goals of our schools to maintain at least some type of in-person learning. And I think I jumped on the call as Mr. Ellis was talking about, kind of the ongoing wave we're seeing of more and more cases. I'm happy to report that we are seeing cases in school, but we're not seeing transmissions within school. But it has been involved a lot of juggling. We're very actively involved with the contact tracing process with the Department of Public Health and Laura Vasile, and making sure that we're getting information out to our families with regards to all the best practices to keep our schools open and safe. And we've been quarantining groups of people that are identified as direct contacts. And that's really been enabled us to kind of maintain a consistent instructional model. We have had to make some modifications to enhance mitigation strategies, particularly at Johnson through the high school, where our schools are, I guess, for lack of better words, the most crowded, and we did have to go for a remote for a very short period of time right before the holidays and right after, meaning Thanksgiving, which I think actually corresponded pretty well with some of the outbreaks we were seeing in the broader community. Because we were having some staffing issues as a result of the number of people that had to quarantine. But we worked through all of those, and we were back in session this week. We are still seeing, we did see a shift in the number of families who opted to put their children on distance learning. Actually, we just put the numbers together today. It shifted from about 22% when we started at the beginning of the school year, and we're about up to 27%. And we did see a slight uptick in the past couple of weeks, not surprisingly. and the number of families who chose to go on distance learning. And we anticipate that will likely go through the holidays as we kind of prepare for the good news that's on the horizon, which is the vaccinations. And so we've been able to manage with PPE and implementing the mitigation strategies. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've been successful in kind of maintaining an in-person model. And that kind of, I mean, I'm happy to answer general questions, but Terry, do you want to talk a little bit about the financial part, or do you want?
Yeah, can they share the screen with you, and do you want to put that full spreadsheet up? And
Terry, I think you shared the wrong spreadsheet with me earlier. That one, right?
It's the fourth,
Fourth tab?
there's tabs. It's the fourth one
Okay.
over. Yeah.
Would you want? Yes, I can. Hold on, just give me 1 second.
I know this is the summary that's up on the screen now, but I think Bob Kozlowski sent
Okay.
everyone all the details.
This is what I have. What if I make you,
Yes, if you make me the host.
how about if I make you a co-host and then you can,
Sure.
give me just 1 second.
Yeah, it was the tab labeled Board of Finance, Board of Ed.
I got.
Here we go. Okay.
Well, I'm getting my screen sharing ability. Any general questions about anything? Okay, I
All
got
right,
it.
so we'll start at the bottom, Christine, and then
go
we'll go
back up?
back up to the detail. So I think all the Board of Finance members did receive this summary, and then I know Bob Kozlowski sent out detail also. This one, we went over this with the Board of Ed last month or a meeting or two ago to give everybody an update in more detail. Some of it we had to wait on because the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant money was critical to how we could move forward. And I will tell you that the grant, Nick had asked me, it is federal money, but it is administered by the state of Connecticut. And the state decided to take money that they could have kept themselves or they could have passed down to localities, and they decided to pass more down to the schools. They based the distribution on that survey that we did a long while back. And so I still have columns there showing, so that you can reference where we thought we might be back in June when we really didn't even have a plan at that point. So they kept sending us more and more guidance, and it was very structured. And by the time we were able to file and get it approved, it was mid-October. And the caveat is it has to all be spent by December 30th, not the 31st, but the 30th. So we spent a lot of time structuring this grant and you could go back in time and charge things prior to this grant. We did go back all the way to July 1, and we made sure that our expenditures would meet the criteria of the grant. And you had to submit it in a great level of detail, and they went over it line item by line item. Fortunately, they approved the grant. So we are making use of the full $563,000. So that then, and you can see the other thing they allowed us to do was they allowed us, you remember when we first told you about this grant, it was in certain buckets.
Right.
And we were not going to be able to use all the money in the buckets it was originally given to us. And then they agreed that you could request some reallocation between the different spending buckets. And with some caveats, of course, you could not reduce the money they were giving you for the cleaning type of things, PPE, those critical items. And you see we were allotted 440, we actually went up to 58. But good news is we were able to allocate a little bit of this money to some of those personnel issues that we've been most concerned with all along. So we were able to put some additional money towards the custodial overtime we've been incurring. for extra cleaning, and also a little bit of academic personnel we were able to allocate towards this. And that made better use of the money for us. So once we were able to complete the grant, and 4 times they changed the guidelines, and so 4 times we revised it. It got submitted, it got approved, and now the thing was you had to make sure you did everything that had gotten approved by December 30th, and we are on schedule to get that done. So
But Terry, the CRF allocation then is not the total needed expense for those, but what you're allocating out of that state money towards those buckets.
the total grant we were given for Bethel schools was $563,000.
Right.
Then-
And you're using that to meet the needs in these categories.
Yes, and so then now we can go up above. Then we went back to how we've really been spending the money. And that's where it's kind of back in the spring. The situation has been fluid for months and months. So back in the spring, we weren't even sure what we needed.
Right.
And in June, we were told we had to prepare a plan. And the plan was due, was it the end of July, or Christine, mid-July, end of July?
Yeah, it was July, like July 24th. Yep.
Okay, so then we had to say, put a plan together, and then based on that plan, figure out what we needed to open school. So,
And just to add one thing to what Terry's saying, during that time also, the guidance from the state was constantly changing. The guidance from the Department of Public Health was constantly changing. Kind of what we knew about what we were supposed to do was always evolving. So when we say that the plan was adjusted many times, it's not an exaggeration by any stretch of the means.
So then we went back, because it was around June that we had to submit this estimate, this original estimate, which actually drove the money that we got from the state. But doing that estimate, we felt like we were doing it very much in the dark. I mean, we went over what we thought, but at that time we hadn't even written the plan. We hadn't even seen the state guidance to really reopen schools. So where are we? Then I went back, and what I've done now is given you an update at the detail level as to how we are in those different categories. And the columns on the left are the personnel related, and the columns on the right are the non-personnel related. And then I identified for you how we're funding each of those line items. And you'll see that we have, I believe we've made very good use of those CRF funds to try to mitigate what we've been spending. Now that we have a plan, now that we have been open for a while, the masks, the sanitizer, the shields, the face shields, the permanent structure shields, the polycarbonate around the students' desks, the disposable gowns, it was just an awful lot of things. So as I said, we went back to July 1, made sure what we had spent on many things that would be reimbursable by this grant, we allocated to that grant. And then we found other ways, and mainly the other things we spent money on. Dr. Carver is on meetings with the State Department of Health constantly. And so she was well aware of the areas that they wanted us to focus on. And taking that information and taking what we know would be good for the town of Bethel and the schools, we used the money as best we could.
And you'll see a lot of the major expenses. One of the biggest components of COVID in terms of mitigation strategies is your HVAC system, your ventilation systems. And you'll note that a lot of the issues that were addressed through this grant had to do with that. That was the biggest driver, I think, in dollar amounts.
At this point, I will tell you, in terms of stuff, we feel that have a good inventory. So I'm not expecting to have to run out and buy more disposable masks or more hand sanitizer for a good while. Even though the money had to be spent by December 30th, we have what we would need to get through the school year. The area that remains, fluid, volatile, however you want to call it, is still the personnel. What we've come to understand, though, is when we reach a point where the personnel issues are going to become too critical to keep school open, it also teeters on potentially costing us a lot of money. And so that all of that factors into Dr. Carver having gone distance learning for a couple of weeks. Primarily it's health, because you have to remember this isn't a financial issue first. This is a health issue first that we're responding to in the best way that we can. And so they do go hand in hand, though, because at the end of the day, you're paying money for however you're operating. So that I think we're in good shape. We are watching the personnel area very closely.
And part of our struggles with the personnel is it's just that we don't have the sub pool that we used to have. People aren't willing to work in schools for $90 a day. And so when we've had situations where we've had to maybe shut down for 2 days and look at, when I say shut down, I mean that students and the staff work remotely and don't come to the physical building. It's really been around how do we make sure that we can cover all of those classrooms with all of the mitigation procedures that we're required to do. And again, we just don't have the sub pool that we had at one time. Now we were very proactive in hiring extra building subs, which are not benefited positions. They're paid on a day-to-day basis. But by doing that, we actually saved ourselves on many occasions because it allowed us to use those building subs to cover for teachers or staff members that might have to quarantine for periods of time.
So Dr. Carver, in terms of your anticipated needs for the school, are you flatlining or your experience from the first few months of schooling throughout the school year, or do you anticipate a greater increase in that January, February timeframe?
So it's a hard question to answer, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in the midst of all that, we're going to have a vaccine. And it's not that the vaccine itself is going to save things, because what I do think with staffing and even in a conversation with Laura Vasile today, and I know you probably have been following the governor's press conferences, school staff or teachers are in the second layer of who's going to be vaccinated. And so in my conversations with Laura, and it's all dependent on the availability of the vaccines. So it's hospitals, congregate care workers, and then essential workers are right on the layer after that. And so they do believe that the schools will have some access and teachers will have some access to the vaccine sometime in January. So if I can start to get my teachers vaccinated and my paraeducators and my custodians and all of the people that are associated with schools, then I would anticipate that we might have less staff that need to be out or that need to be quarantined. It's also not clear to me, Mr. Palmer, so I know I'm not answering the question clearly, but I feel like I've been living this for months. Is if you are vaccinated, then I'm making the assumption that you don't have to quarantine because you have been vaccinated. And so I know that we're going to still have to practice mitigation strategies. And I know that the general public and certainly school children probably won't get access to the vaccine until late spring and possibly summer with children because they don't have the clinical trials on children as they do on adults. So I'm trying to make the anticipation that it'll get better, but I do think it's going to get worse after the Christmas holidays is my guess, because it's been slowly, taking a toll on it. Now, what I will say, on another positive note, is that I think our families are very much more aware when we originally started having positive cases, because I could run some scenarios through with you. But, 2 months ago, we were talking to families about, dad might have been at work. he wasn't feeling well, he was exposed to somebody, he came home, it transmitted through the family. And while he was being tested, he was sending his kids to schools and they were positive. And and so now we have an exposure in school and we have to react to it and we have to quarantine people. People are getting more adept at what they shouldn't do in terms of making sure that they're not sending their child to school if somebody in the home was being tested and symptomatic, if they was a direct exposure, making sure that they don't send them. So there's been some improvement in how families are kind of reacting to some of the expectations. So I'm hoping, and I mean, those of you that are parents probably know, I'm a little obnoxious about sending out messages. I mean, on Sunday night, I sent a text message to all my families, like, don't do this, 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 and this. But it's the only way that I can keep everybody safe. And it's constantly reinforcing those messages. So I know that was a drawn out answer, but I think that it's really hard to predict the staffing piece because of the vaccine and what the potential is around that.
So Christine, if you scroll down to the bottom to that summary now, these are a lot of the same numbers we've been talking about all along. There's some consistency to the numbers. Encumbered to date, and that encumbered to date, remember, some of that was driven because December 30th at midnight, it turns into a pumpkin and we don't have the, we don't have Cinderella's carriage of the CRF anymore. So wanted to use that money wisely, but wanted to stick to the guidelines, get it spent. We do, as I said, we do have a good inventory. Generally in the non-personnel areas, I feel like we're quite shored up. And still we've identified the same funding sources that we have kind of all along. And that's where we're at. So I think I'm feeling more confident. And I hope you're all feeling more confident because if the personnel becomes too stretched, then Dr. Carver would go back to distance learning. We will make the operational changes also that also then, manage safety and manage health, but do also manage the finances.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Terry and/or Dr. Carver?
Will Dr. Carver, Melanie, and Terry be getting vaccinated on a Zoom call?
No, we do it in person.
Terry, you asked us if we're more confident, or maybe Dr. Carver, asked if we're more confident. Look, I think this board is tremendously confident in you and your teams. I'm not confident personally, and I think I speak for the rest of the Board of Finance, that we know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. We don't know what's going to happen in Congress, right, with CARES 2. State funding is one of the two red line issues. Right? It's a red line issue for the Republicans, and it's offset by the red line issue that the Democrats have as to liability protection. So there's no certainty that we're going to get federal relief in the first part of 2021 like we did in 2020. So with that kind of uncertainty hanging over us, to your point, Terry, the financial aspect, the financial uncertainty hanging over us, on top of being driven by the health uncertainty, I believe that it might be right for this board to approve putting the amount of the 385, 834 into the 1% fund. We have to approve that transfer pursuant to the Board of Finance resolution. And I believe, Bob K., you want us, if we're going to do that, you and the auditors want that done tonight.
So do we need a motion? I'll move to approve the.
You see it on the agenda.
It's under the update, and I think
that's what this motion is going to be under, the Board of Ed's update. that was asked for?
We can do it under the update, or we can do it as part of the comptroller's report. I wasn't sure how Bob K.
Something big like that. I thought something pretty big like that was going to be on the agenda, so people would know, but you guys just move forward then.
My understanding, Mr. Manfreda, was it was part of the comptroller's end of year transfers and all of that in that.
Okay.
And people look at agendas, posted agendas to see what's going to be decided on. And under the Board of Ed update, that doesn't show me that they're, we're moving money around, but I'm only one vote.
No, that's fair, Nick. Then it'll come in under the comptroller's report, and that is where we historically have done the transfers. I'm indifferent. We can do it. We'll do it as part of the comptroller's report to be consistent, Nick, with your concern that it is in the agenda in the right place.
We're posting a police car on there, but we're not posting a $385,000 move here. That just surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, and if the police car has to come out of capital non-recurring, so that's a separate line item. That's not part of the comptroller's report and the standard transfers.
Could it not be part of a motion?
Yeah, I think what Nick is saying, well, yes,
yeah.
going to be part of a motion. And I think what Nick is saying is, let's put it under where it is always titled, and that is under the comptroller's report.
Sure.
Okay,
Bob, if I can interject, I mean, it's a regular meeting, so you could just add it to the agenda as well.
that's what I was gonna say.
Wanted to.
We could do that.
Okay. Yeah, folks think we need to add it. I mean, again, I think it's generally understood that it comes in under the comptroller's report, but further clarity is always a good thing.
I think that just in terms of how everything is so different now, and with the Zoom meeting, it's probably better to err on the side of information, even though normally things are a certain way. That's
Okay. So then I would ask to entertain a motion to add to the agenda item of the 1% Board of Ed account, the transfer pursuant to the Board of Finance resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion or questions for Terry or Dr. Carl?
I'm going to be voting no, because $385,000 is a lot of money without the public knowing. This town is built with all the voters, and everybody has the right to know what's going on in these meetings. And I'm new at this, but it just seems a $385,000 move. We're going to put it under comptroller's report, which that's really not what it is, or the Board of Ed update. So for that reason, just for people not knowing on this posted agenda, I'm going to be voting no. And I know everybody else feels differently, but I'm going to stay consistent. People need to know what's going on.
Could I ask a question? I agree. I understand what Nick is saying, but just clarify this for me, because, and pardon me if it's a stupid question. Isn't this 1%, the 1% that is transferred or that is maintained by the Board of Ed from their 460 account?
Yes,
So that's what this is. So every year we do this
correct.
because, okay, I see what Nick's saying, but I just want to say to Nick that this was decided I don't know, 6 years ago. Matt would probably know, 6 or 7 years ago, that they are entitled to 1% of their 460 account.
Well, can I just be, Cynthia, can I just interject? I just want to be really crystal clear, because I don't want to be, I want to be transparent. You're right. It's the 1% account. It was established in 2014.
Okay.
It is different than the 460 account.
It's actually the 450. It's the 450.
Right.
It's just the
Okay.
regular
So
budget.
I don't want anybody to feel like
No.
we're misleading them. It is a separate account from the
I
460.
get it.
But you're right about everything else.
Thank you. Okay, so I get it, and now I have to agree with Nick on that, because if it was just the regular 460 transfer, I'd be like, no problem, we do it every year. I have to go with Nick on this simply because it really should be very public, since it is the 450. It's just the way I feel, and I just wanted to ask that question. Thanks.
Can I ask you guys a question? What makes this different than the transfers we're about to do under the comptroller's report?
Because
I'm-
it's not a normal, it's not normally done every year.
It
No,
is.
it is.
No, it is. It is.
1% from the to the
Right.
450?
Up to
Up
Up-
to 1%.
up to 1% of the 450. Yes.
And it's been done every year since I've been here.
Hold on. I'm really sorry if I'm feeling, I'm sounding dense. I thought that out of the 460, if there was anything left over, you got to retain 1%
It's
of that,
No,
the surplus.
It's
it's the 450, not the 460.
It's the
And
regular-
that is what's done every year.
it's actually legislated that way.
So Cynthia, I think what we're saying is everything that you are saying is what we understand. It's just with respect to this specific account.
Right.
It's the 450 account, which
Okay.
I think we equate to the Board of Ed operating.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So let me say this again. So when you have a surplus from the 450, you get to retain 1% of that account. And that it has nothing to do with the 460?
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
All right, can I jump back in here? Because again, I'm new at this, and I understand the Board of Ed made some kind of motion in August to grab that money and say, we want to put it in there. So you guys kind of in your board made a motion. So you obviously have to come to us if you're coming to us, right? So it's not a done deal until we say so. Is that correct, Bob?
Yep, that's right. And if you recall, Terry and Dr. Carver and Melanie came to us 2 or 3 meetings ago and made the proposal for the transfer at that point.
Right.
And our board said, we get it. We understand it's done every year, but given the general environment, we thought it was best to do it as part of all of the transfers that take place
Yes.
at year end. And when Bob Kay comes to us and says, look, we can't wait any longer. The auditors need the information.
I understand that. I appreciate that. But since we're talking about this money now, I grappled about raising people's taxes through this budget because we took the vote away from everybody this year. And Dr. Carver, Bob Giovanero, and Terry all said, no, we are spending more money. There's be no savings. We tried to see if there was going to be some savings that we can recoup. So everybody can have what they want. Their new assistant principal, their aides, the new police cars, the new policeman. And the 3 people said on a Zoom meeting that we are spending more money than we normally do. So there will be no savings. And then literally a week after we voted, it was a 4-3 vote to raise people's taxes. Then there was 385,000, not 100,000, not 200,000, not 300,000, 385,000. There was extra money. Now I really have a problem with that. If you guys just said in the beginning that, hey, this is fluid, we just don't know, I would take that as your word. But to say there's no savings and then to be 385,000 of savings a week after, I can't swallow that. All right. So I really want to support the schools, but if you just said we don't know and it was 100 or 200, but it was 385,000 in savings. And I really, that's a big rub on my side. So, and I know you guys are going to say sorry, and that, you know what? Because I crashed into your car and I said it's sorry, it doesn't make it okay. It's still wrong. We taxed the people in Bethel, and then we have 385,000. Now we're going to move the money over into an account to buy spit shields. I understand we need to protect the kids and the teachers, but I just don't like it. If my family comes, and Nick Hoffman is on the thing here, so I'm sure he'll have something to say on the internet. But if my family comes and says they need something, I give it to them every time. But when you just take and take and take, I have a problem with that. Thank you for listening.
Could I say one more thing, Bob? I just think that I understand what Nick is saying, and the problem for me is that this is so much bigger than our little town, because there's so much that comes out that's legislated by the state and mandated by the state. So I have a core disagreement with what I think are excessive regulations and whatnot and requirements. And it puts us in a very bad position, because essentially it makes me and for our board be very powerless in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, we're spinning our tires in the terms of the state, what the state requires. And it's just patently unfair for our Board of Education, because they have to comply with that. And then we become the decision makers. The whole thing is fakakta. So I think that we have to, to Nick's point, for me as a conservative, I have to take a stand to try to communicate the lack of the lack of fairness and justifiability at the top. And even though it's for our local, I have to go with Nick on this, just for all the reasons. And I think in the future, if we are just upfront with what we actually have, what we need, and so because we need to be completely transparent in these times. Thanks for listening.
So if I could just add to the discussion, I know that at the time, Dr. Carver and Mrs. Yansky said that there's just a lot of unknowns out here. We don't really have our hands around what we're going to need for containing the COVID in the schools. And what this amount represents, at least as it was presented before, is not savings, but unexpended funds. These are funds that at the time we did not use for what we had designated earlier. They're unexpended. And now we have expenditures and foresee expenditures, just as you heard Dr. Carver explain the unknowns about the vaccination and the personnel. We don't know that vaccination is going to come out in sufficient quantities in order to do it. We don't even know if the teachers are going to take it in that. I made a facetious comment about, are you going to take it on Zoom? A lot of people I know say, oh, I'm not taking the vaccine. I don't know what the temperature of the school teachers are, but foreseeably that vaccine, A, might not be as available as we hope. B, a lot of people are not taking it. And C, we're going to experience another, we know we're experiencing another surge. So these are unexpended funds. If we do not use these funds and give our schools the opportunity of spending these, and they need to come back to us, that's going to be a whole different matter. If they have to come back to us, asking us for more emergency funds to get through. And if these funds go into the general fund of the town, and the state comes along and says, oh, we see a surplus in everybody's fund balance, and we see you, Bethel, sitting fat and happy with too much money there, we're going to take some of this. So I think this is an opportunity for us, the town of Bethel, to keep control of these funds and to give these funds to people that we trust. And I think that we can trust the leadership of the Board of Education and the leadership of the schools. So I certainly will be voting for this transfer of funds. I'm off my high horse.
2 points for Robert's points is that it's called a surplus. I don't consider it unexpended funds, although I know what you're saying. And secondly, what you've just described is another facet to lack of transparency, because now we're trying to make sure the state doesn't find out where we've got, where our mattresses, that our money is buried under. So do you agree or see that the whole thing is dysfunctional? That just as a system, if we're worried that the state's going to see our money, because nobody's taken a stand against anything, we're just trying to operate under the big cloud. I'm just saying that the whole thing's dysfunctional. So I would hesitate to paint that picture about the general fund, although it may be true. We don't know what's going to happen ever. We just don't know what's going to happen ever. So we have to just operate step by step. and not try to predict the future.
Bob, can I jump back in here?
Please.
Bob? Bob? Can you hear me?
He said yes.
I'm not, right now, I'm not sure which way I'm gonna vote, and I know it doesn't make a difference, but I just don't like how the process happened here. Starting off with the agenda and going right through it, okay? I knew this was gonna happen, but then I'm looking at the agenda and it just seemed very vague to me, and I'm on the Board of Finance, okay? So it's not that I'm not gonna support this. We have to support our kids, but I just wanna be very clear. I do not like how we got to the 385 and the process that this is happening.
Mr. Manfreda, could I give you a little more background?
Well, hold on for a second. I've got a response to Nick's question or point as well. But let Dee, did you have something, and then we can go to Terry.
I just had a quick question, just for clarity in my mind. I know you, Dr. Carver and Terry, you had mentioned that the state actually gave us more money than you were expecting them to give us. I mean, it looks like we got well over, $700,000 in grant money over till December 30th, and then some over 2 years. Like, to what extent does that explain some of the additional unexpected funds that we have?
Well, I think they're two different things. We talked about this a few meetings ago, and Nick, I 100% agree with you. You always tell me if we have a common agreement. I agree with what you're saying in terms of maybe we should have been more clear or more. I hear you about my sorry doesn't work, but about at the time, things were changing at such a drastic pace. The executive orders were coming out. They were directing us to pay contracts. I mean, it was changing, I would say, from almost the time we went out of school, March 13th, through June. And we, at any given moment, did not know at certain points what we were going to have to pay and what we were not going to have to pay. And I think a lot of you know, we ended up having to pay all of our contracts, essentially. And we were able to negotiate some of those so that we saved the taxpayers of Bethel money. And not to relive everything now, I hear your point. We probably shouldn't have been so definitive about what we thought we had or didn't have, because at the time, all we saw was that we were going to have to purchase a lot of PPE. We weren't sure what the mitigation strategies were going to be. We had all these executive orders saying we were going to have to pay all of our contracts in full. And we were able to carefully negotiate with all our unions. Terry did a phenomenal job with the bus contract to try to get some money back from them. And we ended up where we ended up. But I understand your point about being definitive, because maybe we shouldn't have been so, concrete at the time. And I hear you. I mean, I accept responsibility where we need to take it. But I think that's what kind of led to where we were with that amount, because it is higher. I think it's the highest since I've been in Bethel. This is the 7th year that we had at the end of the year, because of the craziness that ended the year. But the CARES money is a little bit different, because we didn't know we had that until basically late June, Terry, early summer.
I can't even remember exactly. I wanted to add, Christine, that the state put us out to distance learning.
They
but
did.
Never said it was a permanent move.
Right.
And because we know this very well, because we were in the middle of the construction contract.
They'd say 2 more weeks or a month.
2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. And we kept, I was worried about the timing
of coming back.
We would have had to purchase things in order to come back.
Right.
And they kept delaying and delaying, and it became more clear to us towards the end of the year that we weren't going to
come back.
Okay.
It wasn't until, so let me just finish. So I did not run out and spend the money, because at that point they were talking about come June, they were talking about developing plans. And then we were talking about, well, if we're still in distance learning next year, what will we need? Maybe we should buy these things. And we all just took a deep breath too and said, we're not going to rush around and buy the wrong things. But we don't even have the guidance. We don't even have a plan. Now we know we're not going back. I mean, if we were going back, it was going to be a mass purchasing of all the PPE stuff. Like, it would have been a little crazy. So some of it, not all of it, Nick. I mean, I always end the year with some money left. But some of it was, we kind of hit the pause button until we had better information about what we needed. And back in February, March, April, it became very apparent that a lot of it was guesswork as to what we really thought we needed. And so rather than spend it, we said, you know what? If we don't spend it, it'll go in the 1% account. It'll be there for other good uses in Bethel.
Okay.
I'm being honest about that, because it was crazy.
And I appreciate that. And I want to commend the two of you for keeping these kids in somewhat normal of a classroom. All right. And I know you guys are working really hard for that. And this, I really do appreciate it as a taxpayer. But going back to Mr. Palmer's comment, Bob K., can you explain to me why the state can come in and take that money? Okay, I understand that, you know, we send our money in and then the state sends it back to us, but can you just kind of speak of that? Why they can take it back from us?
So probably about 2.5 years ago, it was around August timeframe when the state was in real bad difficulties. They were looking at all the fund balances around town. In fact, I remember Matt and I were at a cost meeting, and it was the January before. And the governor got up and he said, I looked at all of and he called it your checking accounts, but really it was the fund balances. And you guys out there sitting in front of me have more money than the state does in total. And we got to look into this. And so they were really looking at a possibility of assessing us or taking a percentage of our fund balance to support the state at that time.
And to add to that,
2.5 years ago.
Nick, to add to that, they were also leveraging ECS. So they were saying that, and why can't I remember our previous governor's name? Somebody help me.
Malloy.
Malloy. But they were, I think you
blocking.
know that I went to the Capitol several times and testified, because they were also looking at the Bethel fund balance and saying, we're going to take more ECS away from you because you have whatever it is. And I had to, and I know Matt went up to the Capitol and testified also, but I testified at least 2 or 3 times, and they were using that.
Yeah, if I can help clarify that, Nick, they can't come and take money away from us.
No, what they take is
what they do is they say, oh, you have this much money, we're going to cut your ECS by that
right.
much. That's what, so.
And they were also trying to pass on teacher retirement. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, $4 million worth, right?
Right. And so I had to go testify against that. So they were trying to use that too. So that's what they were trying, and that's what they, under the Malloy administration, I think more so than I see now, but that definitely happened.
Okay.
I remember
Bob,
that very vividly.
we moved the 385,000 into the 450 account. Hopefully everybody spends it like it's their own money. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Like it's
Well, and Nick, maybe in a final word, frankly, I take offense to any suggestion that this process hasn't been transparent. We have talked about the 385 specifically for the last 3 meetings. Now, members of the public, they're just too busy with everything going on in their life. And we know that. They don't have the time to come to our meetings. We know that by the Zoom meeting attendance. So they refer to us, or they rely on us to be knowledgeable in the balances and how best to use them. We have talked about this 385, as I mentioned, every one of the last 3 meetings. And I know even board members have had less than 100% attendance. So I take offense to any suggestion that this hasn't been transparent. In fact, we've been talking about it holistically in a world that has tremendous uncertainty. If somebody in the public has a concern, I think they have all of our phone numbers. They know how to get a hold of us. So I just want to go on record, Nick, that look, this is the way we've done it. There's always ways of improving the process, but it has been an open and transparent one, especially as to this 385. So again, final point, let's move on. I just think that I'm going to have to disagree with the assertion that this was not transparent. I think it's on record as being talked about a number of times.
And Bob, thank you for that. And the rub I had, it wasn't spelled out on an agenda. This gets posted online, gets posted. Well, we can't go in our own town hall, but I'm just saying it could have been posted more clear. I'm new at this, but I think it could have been more clear. All right. But again, I made a motion. I'm not sure if I got a second yet.
I just want to say one more
Second.
thing, because I think the final word, I don't care if I'm the final word, but I'm saying this very respectfully, Bob Manfreda, that sounded a little bit like a lecture, a little bit. And I just want to point out that my definition of transparency does not imply deceit. I'm not saying when I say transparency, just for your information, that there's deceit implied. When I say transparency, I just mean fully open. And, you know, we went through this where we wanted to have more specific expenses from the Board of Ed. That could be transparency, not that they purposely withheld anything, just that we wanted more. And that's what Nick and I know we talked about a few meetings ago. So that I just want to put that very clearly. The word transparency is not a trigger word. That's all.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
not, Cynthia. I take it as
Thank
being different than deceit. My point is, we have talked about this topic in public meetings, which are open to the public, which are taped and viewable by the public. So we have talked about this. I know that things have come up in our personal lives and our professional lives where we sometimes miss meetings. That happens. But every one of these meetings, we've talked about this. And that's my point of transparency. It's out there, no suggestion at all about being deceitful, but very much I'm making the assertion that I think this has been completely transparent. So
But to your point about people being busy, sometimes all they can do is read the agenda or, you know, not even the minutes. Sometimes they can just look and see what's going to be talked about. That's all they can do.
fair enough. All right. So we have a motion on the floor.
And a second.
A second. So all those in favor of the motion, which is to transfer the amount of $385,834 into the 1% fund, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Opposed?
Aye.
So it looks unanimous. Okay. That was, I thought, outstanding discussions. So thank you all. Moving
Thank you
on-
very much.
Yeah, thanks,
Just-
Terry, Dr. Carver, Melanie, thank you all.
Just to
moving
make
on-
sure, was that unanimous?
Yes,
Thank you.
sure. So now moving on to the comptroller's report. Robert, to you.
Bob, you have to unmute. There you go.
There you go.
Are you trying to be non-controversial, Bob? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Well, being non-controversial is no fun.
Uh-oh, what happened? Oh, okay.
This is the Board of Ed. Yeah, not the,
Yeah, I'm just going to, following up on the Board of Ed transfer to the town transfers at this point.
Dion, I'm assuming you have control of the board. And so I think, right, it's, I don't know, can you see this?
Yeah,
it's
you're
that
muted
one.
too.
It probably was the first one that I included in the package. That's Board of Ed, that's the car.
Give me just a second, guys. I had it all up here. I think I exited out of it. Okay, just one minute. Won't let me. Stop here.
Well, let me ask, do all the board members have the hard copy of the transfers?
Yes,
Let's see, Dee, do you have it? The hard copy?
I don't have a hard copy, but I have a copy on my computer. Is that what you mean?
Nick, do you have a copy? Cynthia, do you have a copy? Okay, so Bob, I think we all have hard copies.
Okay.
You want to
All
talk
right.
to the hard copy?
So we have the debits and the credits. The debits are the accounts that were at the end of the year, June 30th, 2020, in a deficit position. The ones on the right, the credits are surplus. And the total of both columns have to add up to the same number, 1,338,357.30, and they do. And I'll just work my way down. The first one that's a big deficit is professional services at 234,406. And the details behind that is contract negotiations and legal fees. The legal fees essentially are from the court case. One of the main items is the court case from Berkshire Hathaway, and our total spent on that is $112,211. We have attorney fees for the town attorney at $105,000, and then there's planning and zoning fees, and also negotiation fees for the different contracts that we had, to the extent of about $91,000, $92,000. So they far exceeded the amount that was budgeted of about $182,000. And that's the shortfall in that account, 234. The next big one, and it's not really that big, but it's Park and Rec. And it's a number of little items in there. It's, safety issues. That the account that it's coming from is from maintenance and repairs. And it's an account that has been cut historically over the years. So, I mean, she does what she can do, but any specific safety items have to be done. And she's got contracts to take care of the fields, to some of the plowing, the fertilizing and things like that. And essentially, when you add up the entire account, we're short by $34,618. Excuse me. The next one is the police account. It's over by $61,713, and that is coming from basically the salaries that were negotiated at the end of the year. But that number appears, and if you go back up on the right-hand side to, we had the wage contingencies that everybody knows about. So we had the amount budgeted for any increases, potential increases in salary accounts. So we don't specifically take the wage contingency and bring it back to the individual department accounts. It'll just show up that there's a deficit there. Fleet maintenance, there was a bunch of equipment and supplies that were purchased. That's what's driving that account. It adds up to it's all over the place. There's nothing really that stuck out and lost some products for 11,827. But those are all supplies that he has to buy for the repairs of the different vehicles within the town. And the other account that's over is we had some major repairs for some of the trucks. There was $38,000 for CNS Auto. We had some trucks in for repairs during the year, major trucks, the big ones. And they were, they added up to, I think a couple of transmissions possibly. So that accounted for that increase there. Moving on down, building maintenance. This is a couple of different items, but what it comes down to is the contracted services within there. We had two major items. One is the elevators in the building. I don't know if you guys were ever in the building when they, a number of times last year, the elevators have stopped working. And we've spent about $53,000 to cone elevator and escalators during the course of the year. And that's the reason why in the capital budget, we're looking at potentially repairing or replacing the two elevators that are in the town hall. They did some major work on the one at the library, and now we had that. The other issue is in the back of the municipal center, we had an underground tank, oil tank that had to be, we removed the oil. We used a lot of the oil, and then we moved the balance to a couple of the different tanks at the schools. But that had to be taken out because we no longer had any insurance coverage on the underground tank. The insurance company said, you got to take it out. Otherwise, the policy is going to cost you about $20,000 a year for if you wanted to do that. But we spent about 24.8 plus a couple of $1,000 to remove the tank and abate the issue back there. So that tank is gone. And that increased that account as well to $91,638. So as you move down the column on the left-hand side, we had for expenditures $421,000 in savings during the course of the year. And what I'm proposing on these transfers at this point is $21,000 to go to the fund balance, and the other $400,000 to be transferred to capital non-recurring for the future, any capital needs we might need. So, I think that's an appropriate place. I mean, the Board of Ed, you'll see zero there. And the other item I want to bring up was the education maintenance account. The 460 account is 315 is over. But if you remember last year around this time, we had a special town meeting to appropriate funds to fix the chiller and the boilers at the middle school and also at the high school. And that represents, accounting wise, we have to put it through the 460 account, but it's going to be paid through the fund balance, which was appropriated last year at the special town meeting. So, I mean, that's the gist of the transfers. On the right-hand side is the surplus. I mentioned the miscellaneous transfers and charges, $301,000. The bulk of that is the wage contingency that is available to support all of the increases from the union contracts. In utilities and service charges, we had a $207,000 surplus, and the bulk of that is from utilities. We budgeted $227, we spent $209, and then we also have fuel oil at $43,000, and we spent $9,000 because we're at a point where we don't really have to budget that anymore. There's most of the buildings are on gas at this point. And the last item was 386 for the employee benefits. Now that we've negotiated essentially all of the contracts and brought the unions over to the partnership plan, we had some major savings there as a result of those negotiations. So, and one other item further down on the highway, the 199 surplus, that's coming from sand, salt, and then the maintenance account. We budgeted 337, and we only spent $186,000. So that represented the bulk of that savings there.
So Bob, in some of these surpluses, will we see downward adjustments in the annual ask? Because, you know, based on,
Yeah, on specifically, yeah, the medical will bring down, you know, like with the fuel oil, we'll bring that down, and then the other utility account will bring that down as well. So we can definitely see some savings there.
so we could look to this and kind of see some type of at least downward pressure on the budget ask for the next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, we'll hang on to this.
Bob, well, I'm sorry, any other questions for Bob? I can't see everybody, it looks like.
Yeah. I have one thing, Bob, that was very good information. You know, you gave good answers for normal people to understand it. So thank you for that information, Bob.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Nick.
So is this need a movement to approve or?
Yes, we definitely need a motion on this specifically for the audit report, because
Okay.
this will zero out the accounts. There's movement back and forth between the different departments. And what the auditors do is actually bring each account down to zero.
I have one question. What actually is a normal person? What defines that? Asking for a friend.
Today, it's really hard to realize there's a normal people in this world, but sometimes you can get a gut feeling. And what Bob said was a normal language. It's appreciated.
It's good to know there's one on this call anyway.
Can I just point something out from what Robert said, Palmer? If you remember when we did the budget for the medical expenses, we were talking about the insurance companies looking at a 10% increase, but the budget barely went up. It's because we had already taken some of these in effect. So I just don't want you thinking there's going to be a $300,000 reduction in the hospitalization line come budget season.
Okay.
285 is okay.
Or are you suggesting more?
So I'm willing to put forth a motion to approve the transfer of $1,338,357.30.
What?
No, I guess what you would say is you approve the transfers as
That's submitted.
presented by the controller, because I have to send the auditors this schedule that you're looking at right now, plus a copy of the minutes before they can actually finalize the audit report.
So Bob, what we're moving is the 400,000 and 21,000 in the fund balance, basically, right?
21 would drop to the fund balance, yep, because it's going to contingency. And the 400 is a big item that's going to the capital non-recurring.
Bob, do you want to make that motion?
Sure, I could, or just kind of leveraging off of Robert's point, make a motion to accept the year-end transfers as submitted by the comptroller.
I would second that.
Discussion. All those, I can't see all the people. It doesn't look like anyone has their hands up or a question. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Bob, I take it now, the continuation of the comptroller's report is to go through
The
the,
monthly report, yep.
Yep.
Which I guess Dion can bring up the next report.
Is this what you're looking for, Bob?
No,
The next one is, it looks like this. I don't know if you can see it. You have the revenue
Oh,
on the
I'm
first.
sorry. I thought there we go.
There you go. Yep. Okay. So the first two pages, the first page is the revenue as always, second page is the expenses, and then all the details follow the second page. Revenue, it's on target right now. In fact, talking to the tax collector the other day, she sent me an email. Our collections are back up again. You remember last month I said we're probably down like a half a point, 3/4 of a point. Well, right now, in 2019, at the end of November, we were at 56.57%. This year, we're at 57.66%, which is a little bit more than 1% over last year's numbers. I mentioned last month, it could be a timing difference. It may just be a matter of, certain money's coming in at the end of November as opposed to people normally paying in December. But right now, we're in good position. I mean, it's better this way than continually falling behind. And that 57.66 is the biggest we've had. The other 57% was in 18. It was 57.21. So that's almost a point and a half. Right now, we're almost a point and a half higher than last year. Other items for the revenue are coming in. One item that's in miscellaneous, not miscellaneous revenue, but let me just see where it is. We got $58,000. It's in intergovernmental revenues. $58,000 from our COVID expenses up until June 30th. So I know Tommy is getting the next report ready, and we'll see. We have a potential of up to $137,000 to get reimbursed. And so, so far, we've been very fortunate to receive everything that was presented to the state. So the revenue is on track. We'll continue to monitor the collection rate, and then on the expenses, there's really everything is in line. When I do my analysis, I look to a couple of accounts, and obviously town clerk is way out of whack, but we just had an election. And we hopefully that's other than the referendum, and if we have a referendum in the springtime, that's going to be the only election expense that we're going to have. So she's going to be fine. Although when I take my numbers and I divide and multiply, it looks like it's being skewed. Probate, same thing again, like I've always said in the past. Probate expenses get reimbursed by the other 3 towns, so we're okay. Data processing looks a little out of whack at this point when I do my analysis, but we have to pay a lot of our software fees up front, royalty fees. So they're at the start of the year, so that's going to skew the numbers. And once the months go by, it's going to work out. I think the police department is one thing that I wanted to bring up. They look a little high at this point, and the only reason why they look that way is because of salary increases from the contracts. Also, education increases from the contract, and some of the uniform costs. So, but in particular on the expenses, when you look at the budget that we have right now for the police salaries, and I just had it here a second ago. What you're going to see when we put out the budget in the next couple of months is a number that's probably going to be about 6% higher, because it's going to represent a few years of increases that were always in the wage contingencies. But, they were covered once the contract was finalized. But, there's going to be a drastic jump. And when you look at the 2 numbers, it's going to say, what's happening here, and that would be the big reason for a disparity in those numbers. The other thing on the police contracts and in the budget, you're going to see a difference in, like I said, the education and also the clothing allowances, because those numbers went up a little bit, not as much as the salaries, but there is an increase. So there may be something that's going to be noticeable when you look at the budget for the first time. But other than that, I think everything on the revenue and the expense side, we're in really good shape. I think we still have to watch our pennies. I don't think we should just go out there and say everything's okay, we're 1% up, and let's spend some money. I think we have to hang on to it. Here's the number I was looking for on the police. Right now, the budget for salaries is $4,397,000. And you're going to probably see somewhere around $4.6 million in the next budget, the starting figure, because that's going to include the increases from the last couple of years that were paid after the contract was ratified. So just to bring it up, it doesn't really affect what we're doing here in 21, but it's something that we're going to be looking at in a few months. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So that's about it that I have.
And Bob, on the expenditure side, you had explained to us that earlier in the year, the departments are kind of on notice to spend really just what they absolutely need to try to remain kind of tight in the spending.
Correct.
Includes the capital non-recurring account. Is that kind of the continued message throughout the departments to kind of continue that tight fiscal approach?
Yeah, no question about it. And Terry and I do talk, a couple of times a week. And, if we were to spot something that was starting to trend in the wrong direction, she would not shut down, but she would back off as well. And she's watching the pennies that right now. It's not like she has a budget and she has to spend it. So historically, we've always had a good relationship to both sides. So, and I think that's something that when you go to these meetings around the state, well, you can't go anymore. It's all Zoom. But when we did, they were surprised about the relationship, in the town of Bethel between the Board of Ed and the town. So.
Bob, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Working on this year's budget, okay, I'm sorry, the one that we're working with now, you just made a comment that are we talking to department heads and all that to try to keep costs down? Now, what happens with that money? Say we save $500,000. We can't put it in our fund balance because the state's going to take it. So we're going to just put it in the non-recurring account again? Would that be the same plan that we just kind of did?
We can, at the end of the fiscal year, next year at this time, if there is a $500,000 or whatever the number happens to be, we can make that change, a move to capital non-recurring. Some towns actually start to fund accounts for rolling stock, large equipment, fire trucks, plow trucks, the big plow trucks, and even police cars, so that when the time comes, they can just write the check and it doesn't have to come out of their budget. Some do it the way we just did the capital non-recurring, and others do it where they actually appropriated a separate another capital non-recurring account, or they call it a rolling stock, and they set it up for $500,000 a year, and they just build up that fund to a point where if they need a fire truck and it's costing $1.2 million, they can write the check for it.
Those are referred to as sinking funds. It's
Yeah.
very, very common.
Yeah, I don't know if we, we always wanted to get the road account up to where, Bobby was able to do everything he needed to do, which is around $900,000 a year. We've kind of taken a cut the last couple of years. Capital non-recurring, we're in good shape with the 600,000 plus the additions that we're putting in and how we're watching our pennies. And right now, coming up on the short-term debt, the only thing that's on the short-term debt is the two schools, $20 million for Rockwell and Johnson, so one thing I would like to do somehow, if we can, and maybe, what we just did with the transfers was on the expenditure side. There is going to be some surplus from the collection, the amount that's over 98.7. If we can take some of that and apply it against the short-term debt, so that when we go to bond in July, we don't have to bond 20 million. Maybe we can bond 19 million or 18.5, something less. But that's a conversation for, next month or the month after, once we got the final number on the revenue, but I think that's, the advantage is we won't, we're not going to incur additional interest expense going forward for 20 years, so that's going to be a big savings.
So Bob, if we want to create a sinking fund, where would that sit? Do you have to create a new account line for that?
Yeah, exactly. It would be in the miscellaneous transfers again, along the lines of, the capital non-recurring, but you would just call it, a sinking fund for rolling stock or whatever you want to call it,
Cynthia?
Question.
So as a committee,
I'm sorry, I'll raise my hand.
Go ahead, Cynthia. Go ahead.
No, just quickly, I just wanted to ask, why was there a reason why this particular strategy couldn't be done for the last budget season instead of raising taxes with the, even though they were a small amount of taxes. Was there a reason why that couldn't have been employed? What you're
Well, if you
discussing
remember,
right now?
Cynthia, Back last year at the special town meeting, we did appropriate 990,000 to offset, so we didn't have to put in this year's budget, the 21 budget, to pay down the short-term debt.
I do recall that. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking for probably a nominal amount more from the general fund, probably could have avoided having to raise taxes. And I just wanted to know if that, because I don't recall that option being a topic of discussion, that's all.
I mean, the 990, roughly $1 million is a half a mil, roughly. So we did save the taxpayers some money by doing
Yeah.
that. you
Right.
know, but
Okay,
I
thanks.
guess it's baby steps, a little each time.
Well, it's got to be, I take, Cynthia made a comment earlier about you can't predict the future. That's absolutely true, but you do have to plan for it. And so I think the approach, Nick, for this coming year end, right, this June 30th of 2021, we're going to have shortfalls. We won't have the surplus to the extent we've had it in prior years. Like Bob mentioned, our tax revenues have, knock wood, our tax revenues are staying relatively constant. But we're going to see a fairly significant decrease in the interest that we've earned on our liquidity portfolio, like the fund balance. So that income is not going to be there, that revenue is not going to be there. And we'll see, but a lot of the fees and services that the departments raised in the past may not be there either. So the first use is going to be covering the shortfall in revenues. I think the second approach is, again, this capital non-recurring allocation. We'll have to look at where we end up in the year and kind of compare it to the capital needs schedule. But that could be a second use of, if there is any money left over at any surplus. And the third, to Bob's point, these are just the three things that we balance as the Board of Finance. So shortfall in revenues, capital non-recurring, and then paying off the short-term debt that was refinanced on a long-term basis by bonding less of the school project costs. Prior to you being on the board, this Board of Finance inherited about 10.5 million of short-term debt. 7 million of it was paid off. 3.5 million was refinanced long-term to lock in rates and to take out the variability risk of interest rate fluctuation. As Bob Kay was saying, we intended when we did that a couple of years ago to see where we come out on the school projects and to then maybe pay off completely that additional 3.5 by not bonding all of the costs on the schools. So it's a way of keeping our fund balance. No one from the rating agencies on this call. They likely do view these minutes when they do our underwriting, right? But we are actively and appropriately trying to manage our fund balance to minimize the level of tax on citizens. So it's just, right, it's a multi-decision that we have to, kind of multi-factor decision that this board will go through, as we've done in prior years, in how to deal with where we end up in June 30th of 2021.
Okay, I'm learning.
And we all are as we go. All right, any further questions for Bob on the comptroller's report?
I'd like to make a motion to accept Bob's comp report.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Nothing left on the agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I say Merry Christmas? Is that okay still or no?
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Have a great December.
Move to
Merry
adjourn.
Christmas, everybody.
All right,
Stay safe.
we're
Good night.
adjourned.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry.